We are so privileged to have Marilyn Nelson here, and if you don't know it already, wait till I finish my introduction. You're not going to believe. She has. Here's what I thought of today was the way to describe her. She has the kind of humility that isn't proud of itself. Know what I mean? Yeah. But I have to tell you, if honors were medals that you actually wore around your neck, and she was wearing them, she'd have to be carried in on a litter borne by 4 very large men, probably bare-chested, I'm thinking.
Shaq.
I will give you her credentials now. Her education is extraordinary. She has a BA from University of California at Davis, a master's from the University of Pennsylvania, and a PhD from the University of Minnesota, and yet she's creative. I mean, she's still... Her work, other than her personal writing, has included 2 prominent jobs, one as a professor at the University of Connecticut, where she is now Professor Emerita, and the other as the director of a writer's retreat called Soul Mountain Retreat, which I think you held in your home, did you not, in East Haddam. According to whoever you read, she has published either 14 books or 12 books and 3 chapbooks. Do you know which is right? Okay. I'm just going to have to summarize some of this. Her poetry, 2 of her books of poetry have been finalists for the National Book Award. 3? Mm-hmm. Well, you need to call Wikipedia.
Okay.
Then, the awards she's had that are more general, not specific to her books, include 2 National Endowment for the Arts fellowships, the Connecticut Arts Award, the 1998 Poets Prize, and the 1992 Anisfield Wolf Award. Then, an interesting award, which I asked her about, the American Council of Learned Societies Contemplative Practices Award, which she earned so that she could integrate the practice of meditation into a course which taught writing and reading of poetry, which, can I tell them this? She piloted at West Point. Isn't that terrific? She has, in addition, won the Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Award, the Department of the Army's Commander's Award for Public Service. She was, as almost all of you must know, the Connecticut Poet Laureate from 2001 to 2006. Then she got the Frost Medal last year, I believe, which honors a distinguished lifetime achievement in poetry. Incredibly big award. And now, recently, she has been appointed as a chancellor of the American Academy of Poets. And I will just tell you, in case you don't know anything about that some of her pals, former and current, in the Academy of Poets, in the chancellorship, include Sharon Olds, Rita Dove, Philip Levine, Ashbury Penn Warren, Auden, Elizabeth Bishop, Lucille Clifton, Archibald MacLeish, Marianne Moore, Louise Glick, Maxine Kumin. Yeah, that's where she is.
The dead ones are rolling in their graves.
Oh, well, there you are. This is the kind of poet she is. Her poetry combines humor. Well, this is just my take on it, which you don't need to pay any attention to, because you can go read other more important poets on Marilyn Nelson. But they combine humor and poignancy and what I call gentle knockout punches about racism in particular. You read a poem and realize you are no longer standing up, but you're not quite sure what hit you and how it got so hard. Miller Williams said of her poems, something I liked a lot, just summed up the way I felt as I read. She writes poems, quote, of simple wisdom and straightforward, indelible stories. That was a wonderful. So I'm so happy to invite Marilyn Nelson to come up and read for us.
I'm reading from a new book. It's called Faster Than Light, New and Selected Poems. It came out maybe 6 weeks ago, and I'm very happy with it. And I'm going to read from the new poem section first. This is I've written several little silly poems in which I have dialogues with the muse, and in my poems the muse is kind of impatient with me. I ask stupid questions, and the muse is rolling his or her eyes, basically. And this is another one of these little dialogues. It's called Little Dialogue with the Muse. And I'll try to change my voice so that you can hear the two voices. It's mostly my voice. Little Dialogue with the Muse. Out of its context, does the self exist? Or are we merely products of our time, history, culture, born to pantomime stock roles as minor members of the cast of someone else's drama? Are we dressed in uniqueness, or are we all the same, each of us tricked out in a meaningless name? Once we're erased, how long will we be missed? How long remembered? You resemble clouds drifting across the pale blue atmosphere. Does what we've done survive in a half-life of infinite decrease, perfect or flawed? Your work writes on the wind, Kilroy was here. The signature of a November leaf. So, trust the muse to put you in your place. This is another one. It's called Second Alzheimer's Sonnets. Second Alzheimer's Sonnet. How many things will I forget today? How many times stop still and ask myself what I was going to do? In what new ways will my mind play tricks on me? What a wealth of experiences tossed into the wind. What masterpieces lost even to me. Without them, am I still one of a kind, a unique loop of interpreted memory? How much can one forget? An actor's name, the novel I finished reading last night, where the damn car keys are, and still remain a bubble of identity riding a wave of light. A turd in sewage remembers a meal, my muse remarks. I am what makes you real. So I won't read any more of the dialogues. Stay away from this muse. This is another small poem. I happened to read an article in a new, I guess I must have read it in the Christian Science Monitor, an article about what happened on the afternoon when a jazz band played live in Franklin Park Zoo in Boston. It was a beautiful article. And it reminded me of Rilke. One of my favorite poets is Rainer Maria Rilke. And one of his, I think maybe it's the second of his sonnets to Orpheus, in which he describes animals in a forest, in a European forest, hearing music for the first time. And I just thought that was the same experience, only these are zoo animals. And the only other thing you need to know here is, because this is a conscious imitation of this Rilke sonnet, there's a line from Rilke in German, "O Orpheus singt," "O Orpheus sings," "O Orpheus sings." I don't think you need to know anything more, but except that there's an epigraph. The article focused on the gorillas. And QB was one of the gorillas. And the article began, "QB sobbed when a nearby jazz band stopped playing." Yeah. So this is live jazz, Franklin Park Zoo. A tree grew. Oh, remembering gorillas. Oh, Orpheus singed. Oh, Africa in the ear. The recluse Vip came out. Gigi sat still and wide-eyed, black face pressed against the bars. QB lay on his back as he usually does, vacantly staring. Then he turned over, hairy chin in one huge leather palm. With his other hand, he scratched his head, contemplatively picked his nose. The zebra's ears twirled. Behind their fancy fences, the silenced animals listened to something more. And where there had been, at most, a nest of boughs to receive it, music built a cathedral in their senses. I have a hard time deciding what to read from this book because the last few years, most of the poems I've written have been written as part of larger projects. I've been writing book-length narratives, and it's kind of hard to pick something out of a long narrative. But I think I'll read 3 poems from a book called Fortune's Bones. I was called by the director of the Mattatuck Museum in Waterbury in 2001, I think. She asked me if I would be willing to write a poem to honor what she called a set of human remains in the Mattatuck's collection. I've never heard that term, set of human remains. It turns out to be a skeleton. There was an article about this in the paper, just like I just got it in today's mail. Yes. Okay, so for those of you who didn't see the story, Fortune was an enslaved man who lived in Waterbury in the 1700s. He died in 1798 at the age of about 60. And his owner, whose name was Dr. Preserved Porter, rendered Fortune's bones by drilling holes in the long bones, boiling all of the bones, and then numbering them carefully and reassembling the skeleton. And then he hung the skeleton in a room in his home to be used as a medical school. There were no medical schools in North America. And human dissection was illegal at this time, in the 18th century. So this skeleton was hanging in Dr. Porter's home. And meanwhile, Fortune's wife, Dinah, and their 4 children were still enslaved in this home in Waterbury. So they had to live with Fortune's bones hanging up there. And yeah, when this story came out in Waterbury, the whole town was looking like that. Oh, the scream. Yeah. This I wrote the 6 poems, I think, as a sort of roughly patterned after Requiem Mass. And it's been picked up by Isaiah Barnwell, who's one of the singer-composers with Sweet Honey in the Rock. If you know them, you know them. If you don't, you don't. Anyway, Isaiah has set this to music beautifully, and it belongs to her now. So I'm going to read 3 poems from it. This first one is called Dinah's Lament. It's the voice of Dinah. Miss Lydia doesn't clean the doctor room. She says she can't go in that room. She's scared. She make me take the dust rag and the broom and clean around my husband hanging there. Since she's seen Fortune Head in that big pot, Miss Lydia said that room make her feel ill, sick with the thought of boiling human broth. I wonder how she think it'd make me feel. To dust the hands what used to stroke my breast, to dust the arms what hold me when I cried, to dust where his soft lips were and his chest what curved its warm against my back at night. Through every season, sun up to starlight, I heft, scrub, knead, one black woman alone, except for my children. The world's so white, nobody know my pain, but Fortune Bones. The Mattituck had hired a team of forensic scholars and historians to do research, and they handed me all of this research material. And I went a little bit further on one aspect, and that was to try to understand what motivated this doctor. So I read about the history of medical education in the 18th century, and it's my understanding that at first I thought that this doctor is a monster, but I became convinced that he wasn't a monster, that because he could use the cadaver of a slave he owned without being punished. Although it was illegal, he had to do this secretly. But still, he was not going to be charged with a crime. He did this out of scientific curiosity, I'm convinced. This is his song, and part of it is based on interviews with first-year students in medical school, and part is based on the dissection of the body of, I need to write this in this book. I can't think of the name right now. He was an 18th century utilitarian philosopher, British philosopher, who willed his body to science. And his was the first public dissection. And the doctor who performed this dissection, there's a little brochure of his step-by-step descriptions of what's happening. So, okay, this is Dr. Porter's song. He performed this on a hill outside of Waterbury called a Brigador Hill. So this is called On a Brigador Hill. For 50 years, my feeling hands have practiced the bone setter's healing touch, a gift inherited by Porter men. I have manipulated joints, cracked necks, and set my neighbors back to work. I've bled and purged fever and flux, inoculated for smallpox, prescribed fresh air and vegetables, cod liver oil and laudanum, and closed the lightless eyes of the new dead. And I've been humbled by ignorance. Herewith begins my dissection of the former body of my former slave, which served him who served me throughout his life, and now serves the advance of science. Note well how death softens the human skin, making it almost transparent, so that under my reverent knife, the first cut takes my breath away. It feels like cutting the whole world. It falls open like bridal gossamer. And I've been humbled by ignorance, humbled by ignorance. Standing on a new continent beyond the boundaries of nakedness, I am forever changed by what I see. The complex, delicate organs fitted perfectly in their shelter of bones, the striated and smooth muscles, the beautiful integuments, the genius strokes of thumb and knee. In profound and awful intimacy, I enter fortune, and he enters me. And I've been humbled by ignorance, humbled by ignorance. The director of the Mattituck asked me if I could do something to help the city of Waterbury come to peace about this city divided along racial lines. And at the same time, the mayor of Waterbury was on trial for sexually abusing two little children who happened to be African American girls. So the Waterbury was just going crazy about this. So she asked me if I could help them come to some kind of peace about it. I happened to go to hear a lecture because I'm interested in meditation. I went up to Amherst to hear a lecture given by the great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, and he gave a wonderful lecture, which I don't remember at all. But then in the question and answer period afterwards, someone asked, what is the most comforting thing we can say to people who are in hospice care? And he said that in his experience, the most comforting thing we can say is, you are not this body. So I borrowed his teaching for this poem. It's called Not My Bones. I was not this body. I was not these bones. This skeleton was just my temporary home. Elementary molecules converged for a breath, then danced on beyond my individual death, and I am not my body. I am not my body. We are brief incarnations. We are clouds in clothes. We are water respirators. We are how Earth knows. I bore light passed on from an original flame. While it was in my hands, it was called by my name. But I am not my body. I am not my body. You can own a man's body, but you can't own his mind. That's like making a bridle to ride on the wind. I will tell you one thing, and I'll tell you true. Life's the best thing that can happen to you. But you are not your body. You are not your body. You can own someone's body, but the soul runs free. It roams the night sky's mute geometry. You can murder hope. You can pound faith flat. But like weeds and wildflowers, they grow right back. For you are not your body. You are not your body. You are not your body. You are not your bones. What's essential about you is what can't be owned. What's essential in you is your longing to raise your itty-bitty voice in the cosmic praise. For you are not your body. You are not your body. Well, I woke up this morning just so glad to be free, glad to be free, glad to be free. I woke up this morning in restful peace, for I am not my body. I am not my bones. I am not my body. Glory, hallelujah. I am not my bones. I am not my bones. I think they just decided to bury these bones after all of these years. I think I read maybe 10 minutes from the life of Sorry, making decisions here. From another project. These are Connecticut. I thought that during the 5 years I was poet laureate of the state, that what I would do for the state was to write some books about Connecticut history. And so I did 4 books during this time. 3 of them are actually historically accurate narratives, and one of them is a piece of fiction. This one is from a book I wrote together with Elizabeth Alexander, who is President Obama's first inauguration poet. Ooh, Marley. I don't know where that came from. Sorry about that. This is from Canterbury, Connecticut. This where Prudence Crandall's school was in the 18th century. So I'm going to maybe read 3 or 4 poems from that, and then I think I'll end with that. So let me find the poems. Prudence Crandall. In 1831, 28-year-old Prudence Crandall of Canterbury, Connecticut, opened a boarding school for young women. In 1832, Crandall began admitting young African American women as students. The townspeople responded by poisoning the school's water, setting fire to the schoolhouse. The state legislature passed a law against opening such a school. Prudence Crandall was arrested and put on trial. She spent one night in jail. And finally, in 1834, when the neighbors set the building on fire, Prudence Crandall was forced to close the school. So Elizabeth and I noticed there are lots of studies of Prudence Crandall, but nobody's ever picked up the story of the girls. These African-American girls who came from Boston and New York and Philadelphia, free girls in 1833, 1834. It came on stagecoaches to Canterbury, Connecticut, which still is the middle of nowhere. Yeah. Not knowing what was going to happen to them, and then being welcomed by this violence and harassment. So Elizabeth and I split the story up, and each of us wrote sonnets. Each of us wrote, I think, a dozen sonnets about them. My sonnets are very formal and exact, and they all cover inside the lines, and Elizabeth's are all over the place. Some of them rhyme, some of them don't. She intended to show the expansiveness of the form, that you can say, I'm going to write a sonnet. But you can take that form and do things with it and experiment with it. Mine are just the opposite, because mine are all, I follow the rhyme scheme of great Russian poet whose great-grandfather was an African prince, Pushkin. Yes, yeah. So mine are based on Pushkin, on his rhyme scheme, and all of mine are the same rhyme scheme. Not that it matters, but it did at the time. So I'm going to read. I think I'll just read all of these. There are about 6 of them. Is that okay? And then I'll just end with these. These again, they're just imagining what these girls were like, who they were coming to this school, why they came, why they risked their lives to come to try to get a classical education, because Prudence Crandall was teaching Greek and Latin. Okay, so this first poem is called The Book. Jolted, insensible, mile upon mile, a thin, high-breasted, slow-eyed yellow girl deferential, but wearing the latest style of Paris bonnet from which one brown curl has broken free and frolics below her jaw. All the stagecoach ride from Philadelphia, she has followed the beckoning finger of destiny toward the place where she'll shoulder the burden of being free. I shall learn. I shall teach. The book in her small gloved hands hasn't seemed a Bible to the inquisitive eyes of her fellow travelers. Almost memorized, it comforts her as she watches the changing lands, a friend to travel with into this chance to bridge for her people the abyss of ignorance. Family. My master father sent me up from South Carolina to Boston as a 9-year-old. My mother's illiterate silence has been a death. I wonder if she still labors in his fields. His sister, dutiful but cold as snow, gave me a little room in her house below the stairs with the Irish servants who hated me for the fatal flaw in my genealogy. For the first time in my life, I am at home in this bevy of scholars, my first family. Here, the wallpapers welcome me into every room, and the mirrors see me, not my pedigree. My sisters, Jerusha, Emilia, Elizabeth, but Mama's unlettered silence is a death. I don't know why, I can't explain this one, I have no idea where it came from, but as I said, there was a law passed against opening schools like this, and Prudence Crandall was put on trial, and for some reason, I had the idea that if I was going to write about this, I wanted to refer to Tao Te Ching, the Tao. And particularly, I had read the translation by the great translator who did the book of Job, and he translates Rilke. Anyway, he calls the philosopher, the master philosopher, the teacher. And so there, you'll hear the references to that. This is called the Tao of the Trial. Miss Crandall, you stand accused of knowingly teaching colored persons not resident of the state without prior consent. What is your plea? The teacher does not instruct. The teacher waits. Girl, has anyone been teaching anything to you and your friends? Who taught you how to plead the Fifth Amendment? Your Honor, I submit as evidence of the alleged teaching of alleged students, this colored girl here, who openly reads books and gazes skyward, who has been overheard conversing animatedly in polysyllabic words and referring offhandedly to the ancient Greeks. The teacher teaches without words and without action, simplicity, patience, and compassion. Miss Anne Eliza Hammond. I brought here in a bag between my breasts money from Mama's friend who had bought herself, then saved enough by working without rest to free 4 friends. This woman gave me her wealth of carefully folded dollars so I could take Miss Crandall's course of study. And within a week of my arrival, I was summoned to appear in court. The judge ruled I'd have to pay a fine, depart, or be whipped naked. Honey, the first white fool that thinks he gonna whip me better think again. Touch me and you draw back a nub, white man. I ain't paying and I'm staying. People's dreams brought me to this school. I'm their future in a magic looking glass. That judge and the councilman can kiss my rusty black. Etymology. I've got 3 more. Yeah. Etymology. The filth hissed at us when we venture out, always in 2s or 3s, never alone, seems less a language spoken than one spat in savage plosives, primitive, obscene, a cave mob nya-nya, limited in frame of reference and novelty, the same suggestions of what we or they could do or should ad infinitum. Yesterday, a mill girl spat a phrase I'd never heard before. I stopped and looked at her, perplexed. I derived its general meaning from the context, but was stumped by the etymology of one word. What was its source? Which demon should we thank? For words it must be an abomination to think. 2 more. In all of the histories about Prudence Crandall School, there's always this one man, Albert Hinckley. He went to all kinds of meetings. He was always there, and he's always described as Albert Hinckley, a young white man. You never see anything about anything he says. He's just always there. And so I was just imagining what got Albert Hinckley involved in the preservation of this school. So this is called Albert Hinckley. Last Sunday, a white boy openly smiled at me where I sat with my sisters at the back of the Baptist church. When the pastor spoke of the sin of slavery, the white boy looked back with his eyebrows arched. I could read his thoughts, but I dared not meet his glance. For nothing must pass between us, not one chance for gossip to pounce with glee on one shared smile. No one must think of us as eligible girls. Waylaid by ruffians as we reached the ford, our wagon was overturned. Our sodden skirts waited and slowed us, but no one was hurt. Splashing to me, his eyes looking truly scared, that boy took my hand. Let me help you, miss. From this day forward, I am an abolitionist. And this is called Worth. Today in America, people were bought and sold. 500 for a likely Negro wench. If someone at auction is worth her weight in gold, how much would she be worth by pound, by ounce? If I owned an unimaginable quantity of wealth, could I buy an iota of myself? How would I know which part belonged to me? If I owned part, could I set my part free? It must be worth something, maybe a lot, that my great-grandfather, they say, killed a lion. They say he was black with muscles as hard as iron, that he wore a necklace of the claws of the lion he'd fought. How much do I hear for his majesty in my blood? I auction myself, and I make the highest bid. Thank you. Thank you.